Hello and welcome to Santos on Sports, along with my partner Chris. I am Paul. Welcome in. We are so happy to have a very special guest this morning. You know him as the Patriot Inside Guy for 25 years, working at NBC Sports Boston now. We welcome in Mr. Tom E. Curran. Tom, good morning and thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Chris. How you guys doing?
Fantastic. Before we get into all this Patriot stuff that's going on, we did want to ask you real quickly, how did you end up in your career focusing particularly on the Patriots?
Well, I mean, it's what I wanted to do from the time I was probably 10 years old and realized I probably wasn't going to play in the NFL. And if I could cover any sport, I would have wanted it to be the NFL. And if I covered any team, I would have wanted to be the Patriots. So dream come true situation. I went to St. Anselm College, was an English major, really didn't do a lot of journalism. Then when I was 24, after spraying lawns for a couple of years, I did get a job in journalism down the Cape, kind of climbed the ladder. And by 1997, there was an opportunity at the Metro West Daily News in Framingham that had normal high school sports coverage, the way, for instance, New Bedford Standard Times would, but also the component of, hey, go down there and do Patriots twice a week. So I started with that, did what was a pretty creditable job there, advanced to the Providence Journal in 2002, and then went to NBC Sports in 2006, which then I came back and covered the league, and then I came back and covered the Patriots specifically for NBC Sports Boston for the last 13 years.
Tom, I'm sure it's been a busy week for you, a lot going on in the NFL. I've spoken with a lot of Patriot fans during this week, knowing that you're coming on. Their main question for you is the scenario with Josh McDaniels now gone, Patriots in that coaching staff. Who do you see taking over the offense, taking Josh's place, making the play calls? Combination? Or are they going to go with one specific play caller now with Mac Jones in year number 2?
Yeah, there has to be one play caller. And that's something I talked about with Brian Schottenheimer, former Jets, Seahawks offensive coordinator a couple of weeks ago on my pod. There has to be one play caller. We'll see who that becomes. My money and most people's money is on Nick Caley, the former tight ends coach. A lot of people think highly of him, and that's something we should bear in mind when we think about, what was Josh McDaniels before he became Josh McDaniels, or Bill O'Brien, or Charlie Weiss when he was with the Jets or Giants. What was he? They had to become someone. Julian Edelman, I spoke to him at the Super Bowl, and he thought highly of Nick Caley. So Caley seems to be the most likely play caller / offensive coordinator in grooming, but I'm sure Bill will not give out a title. Joe Judge will be working with the quarterbacks. Matt Patricia will be working with the offensive line. We'll see if Patricia becomes the offensive line coach, but whether or not Judge becomes the specific quarterbacks coach or is an assistant quarterbacks coach, or they hire another quarterbacks coach to work with him, all remains to be seen. But between that, Chris, and which is a little bit head scratching, between the releases of Van Noy and Shaq and the trade of Shaq Mason, where you're shedding good players and not adding anything at all to create cap space for what in general, there's a lot of, hey, let's just suspend all doubt and believe that Bill's got a plan here. I think Patriots fans get asked to do that an awful lot these days.
Well, it's interesting because Chris hit the nail on the head and you just alluded to it. Patriot fans are getting frustrated. Like, what are we doing? How come we're not doing anything? How come all these free agents are going by the wayside and everything? So let me ask you this. Is there any chance at all that, Mac Jones, Bourne, Smith, Aguilar, Henry, Barmore, Judon, Millis in year 2, right? Are we better off with that year 2 in the system with those players than taking, say, a more talented player, paying them a bunch of money and then throwing them into the mix, but now they're a year behind everybody else? Could that be the thought process of Belichick, and could it work by any chance?
Yeah, by osmosis, those guys have to be better. I think that Jonnu Smith wrote that this week. Jonnu Smith is probably the most important Patriot in 2022 because what you are paying him, and last year was not, interestingly enough, a huge sum of money to pay him. I know the contract's big, but he had a $1 million base and a $5 million cap hit in 2021. So I'm sure they weren't saying, oh, it's great that he only had 27 catches on 48 targets. It's not what they were looking for. They wanted more. But this year he's got a $9 million, a $10 million cap hit, it's a $9 million salary and an even higher cap hit. They need that guy who's consuming that area of the cap to contribute in a way commensurate with that. He has to be better. I'm sure he will be better. Josh McDaniels loved him and his athleticism early in the year, but he missed mini camp and he missed portions of training camp and he didn't go to OTAs. So he was set back. Aguilar should and could be better. And the Patriots did spend a fair amount of money on him, but this is the last year of his deal. It was a 2-year, $22 million contract. Bourne's a good player. So, yeah, you're right, Paul. Those players the Patriots will rely on to get better. So when we see all the buses going by with fans from other teams waving their arms because they're so happy about all the guys they added, that was the Patriots driving by themselves on a bus last year because nobody else had any money. Right. So, to me, you can't kick rocks over the Patriots not adding a Devontae Adams or an Allen Robinson. But it's inevitable that you do, especially when you see, again, the Van Noy and Mason moves. And you're like, those are the better players on the team. Those are the guys who make the biggest contributions. Look, Van Noy's nobody's idea of an all-pro at this point. But he's good. He was their most productive linebacker. And the same thing with Mason on the offensive line. That I think becomes frustrating. Because it's okay to say, hey, they're not in the contest this year. They did it last year with free agency. But then when you're just inexplicably constructing the coaching staff in a way that makes even the most loyal Patriots fans say, what the hell are they doing? And you're shedding players, you're like, Bill, you're asking a lot, not just of the fan base, of your team, and certainly probably, when it comes down to it, fellas, of ownership, because they pay attention.
Absolutely agree, Tom.
I'm the king of the awkward stop.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Not at all. But, that being said, is there anything left in free agency that the Pats might sneak into? Or, obviously, the draft coming up.
Yeah.
Where do you see the Patriots turning now? Do they start offensive line right away? Do they look wide receiver right away? Do they boast up that defense that really struggled down the stretch last year? How do you see the Patriots moving on? Can they sneak a guy in free agency? And what will they work on in the draft?
Yeah, there's names there still, Chris. Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Phil Perry's done an excellent job. He's my colleague at NBC Sports Boston. And, he's gleaned some really good intel. And with Valdez-Scantling, you have what the Patriots have been seeking, which is a tall, strong boundary receiver, which is what they thought N'Keal Harry would be, but hasn't been. But at least Valdez-Scantling with the Packers has been pretty productive. He's 6'5". I think he's 220 plus. So he's that big target. And he can fly. I think he runs a 4.3. I should be checking that. Just double check me on that. So that would be the kind of guy that they could add. There's other names out there. I mean, I did 44 different Patriots possibilities and gave all kinds of reasons why they would be attractive. OBJ might still be on the market. You buy low on him being injured. So yeah, there are players out there that they could still add, which would change the tenor. And I would expect that's going to happen at some point in second wave free agency. Remember, free agency began, I think it was Wednesday at noontime or 4 o'clock, whatever it was. But the tampering period began Monday, so it feels like we've been in it forever. As for the draft, the Patriots' most extreme needs, I think, are in the cornerback area. They could use another edge rusher to complement Judon. Obviously, not only do they need a tackle because Isaiah Wynn's in the last year of his contract and Trent Brown is now a free agent and taking visits, but they also need a guard, I think, and guard depth because Karras has left.
Right.
I mean, it's nuts. Karras has left and Mason was traded after Karras left. So they need that, and obviously wideout. Fortunately, it's really deep at some of those spots. So is it 23 they're picking?
Yes, I believe so.
So at 23, you're not saying, okay, we're taking a cornerback come hell or high water, because if all the corners are gone or you don't like them there and there's a wide out there, well, we need one of those too. We're going to take him. So they have enough slots where they could take best player available and have him be applicable.
Paul, before your question, Tom, that's a 4.37 for the 40 yards for Scantling.
And how big is he?
No, how big? I'm not sure. He runs a 4.37 in the combine when he did it. So we know he can fly.
That's a speedy guy.
That's a speedy guy.
I wanted to get into, building up your sources over the years. I've noticed that, one of the things I like about following you and being a fan of yours is that you've developed some great sources whereby when Tom Curran says, I'm hearing this, boy, you can, nothing's 100%, but you can almost take it to the bank. And I can remember that time where they said, for example, that Brady had bought a house or built a house in Connecticut. And you said, no, he didn't. And like, yes, he did. You're like, no, he didn't. And I'm like, hey, it turns out Curran was right again, So building up the sources and developing that trust, how does that all happen? And I imagine it's something that you're proud of over the years that you can say that, people trust you.
Exactly. It's certainly a process, but sometimes, like it is with Jonnu Smith this year, it's osmosis. You're there day in and day out. Your bedside manner has to be particular so that you're not always, they see you coming like, oh, here comes this guy. And you have to ask, and you have to develop trust. I had a lot of trust with the folks, with Brady himself and the folks around him. And that was built over 22 years because I've covered the team since 97. I was there when he wasn't playing. I was there when he began playing, and he and I would talk, a little bit because I really thought that he was good because I watched him in that training camp in 2001 and paid attention. I said, he's playing better than Bledsoe, guys. And people, yeah, okay, against the 2s and 3s. I'm like, no, he's a better player. So he notices that. Those guys all notice that. That's a big part of it. Josh McDaniels was a guy who I got along great with. Scott Pioli, someone I got along great with. Bill and I, back further, we used to have a very, very strong relationship. And over the course of time, I think that he has viewed the way the media covers the NFL and the team differently. If you look, the things that Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport get quickly off the Patriots or Field Yates are things that we used to get locally. Why is that? Bill's a quid pro quo kind of guy, and he's going to want something back for whatever he gives you. With Ian, with Field, with Adam, he may have a proclivity to loop them in on things because they may loop him in on things that are going on around the league. Mm-hmm. With us, perhaps locally, previously, it would be for favorable coverage. Not necessarily favorable, but look, I can tell Curran my side. I can explain to him my thinking on something. And as a result, he's not just out there, shooting blow darts in my neck. And I generally, over the years, have done that. And I still think I do that, but I kind of question some of the decisions that are made too. And I think during the Brady process, questioning those decisions and what plan was in place and why exactly he was being shuffled off to Tampa Bay results in me not having as good a relationship, plus pushing back on some of the drafts. He gets pissed when I ask questions about that. But we're just not there to make friends. In the end, they're not paying us. Our organizations are paying us. And yeah, they're paying us to be entertaining. And yeah, they're paying us to give our opinions, but they're also paying us to give information. And if the information pisses fans off or pisses teams off, then what are we doing if we're not reporting it? And we've kind of toggled into that area where we're getting away from somebody's going to be pissed off if we call it like it is. So we just have to be a conduit for information. And I see that with some of the bigger places and the bigger reporters. They're just conduits for information. They're not giving anything that says, well, this was a shitty thing to do by Deshaun Watson. Or, you know what I'm saying? So sorry for the S-bomb. I'm sure this is a PG case.
We can handle it.
We can handle it. You were there, Tom, when, as you just said, Brady came along and you got the experience. Now it's Mac Jones. Personally, myself, I thought he had a pretty good rookie season. Now he's got a new offensive coordinator that he's going to have to work with. What would you like to see from him in year number 2, moving forward and bringing this team a little further, maybe in the offense and obviously into the playoffs?
It's a great question because in Brady's second year as a starter, he regressed a bit.
Yep.
and he learned a lot of the things that he could not do by trying to do things. There was a game against Washington they lost, and he got picked off. A game against the Chargers they lost out there, 21-14. I think LaDainian Tomlinson ran for like 217 yards. And Brady didn't play well in those games. He had underthrows. He had bad decisions. He tried to fit it into places where it didn't fit. Steve Spurrier beat the Patriots that year, I think, with the Redskins. But so Mac Jones you might see a regression this year. Mm-hmm. And that won't be surprising because you're finding out what you can't do. And you're also minus Josh McDaniels. Imagine Brady if, he didn't have Charlie Weiss and Bill Belichick took over for Dick Rabine in 2001 as the quarterback's coach. So Brady in his first year, second year in the NFL, had Charlie Weiss and Bill Belichick in his ear all the time. Who's Mac Jones going to have? And who's Mac Jones binky? The way Troy Brown was, the way Kevin Falk became, the way Deion Branch became. We don't know. So it's going to be a tougher year for him, very tough. But what I want to see from him is better arm strength.
Yep.
And really, that's it. I want to see him come back and be able to throw the ball with more force on the throws where he needs to. That's it. That's all. That's all he needs, because right now it's not strong enough when he's not able to stride and throw and walk into it. And Brady's, people say, he can't throw downfield. Yeah, well, doesn't matter if he can't throw downfield. He was a catcher and he could throw to second base or 20 yards down the middle of the field as hard as he needed to.
Well, before we let you go, Tom, I just want to ask a question about the different media people you get to interact with. I mean, I'm a fan of Tom Curran, but also a fan of Mike Felger and Tony Maserati and Greg Bedard and these different people. And, for example, what's Mike Felger like? I see him there. He's so prepared. He's so wound up. He's always got an opinion, which is what makes his show so good. What is he like? And what are some of these other gentlemen that you get to interact with? What are they like?
Yeah, I think one great thing about Felger is what I admire about him is that he is the same off air as he is on air. He has a plan for what he wants to do on the shows. He does not like grab ass. He used to say that early in his career when he was starting to move from writing into TV, and he would be a sit-in host on those old Fox Sports New England shows, and I'd be on with him, and he'd be doing that, and he'd joke around. He'd go, "Can we stop the grab ass? Stop the grab ass. Stop the grab ass." And be like, who are you? You're sitting in the press box with me. What do you know? But that's the thing, is he wants the train to keep moving. He wants people to continue to be engaged. And if they're engaged because they're hearing something that they don't like, then they will perk up. I mean, the use of the word "you," I don't know if he coined it. I don't know if he adopted it.
Exactly.
But it is such genius because it's constantly to the listener saying, you wanted it, your team, you can't. It's incredibly engaging. So I think he's very smart. I think that he is entertainment. He is not information. He'll be the first person to tell you that. He wants a fast-moving show where people speak briefly, and I admire all of that. Are we friends? I would say we're friends. But I have a different personality than he does. We just operate differently. Tony Maz, he was, a hidebound traditional journalist for a long, long time. And, I think that he understood how his bread would be buttered going forward when he went with Mike. And he's done very well with that. He's very good. He's a very, very good writer. He's a well-connected guy, and he understands that, look, in his job, his opinions are going to be the most important thing, and they have to be hard. The fence sitting, that's the thing is, I can be more of well, you can look at it this way, but it also might be a little bit this way, and time will tell. And in the end, most of us who are consuming that go, yeah, I guess so. But does that, and I think that's my job, and that's how I like to do it, but that doesn't evoke the same emotion that, oh, he sucks, does.
yeah, right.
I don't want to walk that plank and say somebody sucks and later on have to say, well, he didn't suck. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not an opinion guy, I'm an information analysis guy. It's interesting. But those guys are great. You mentioned those. Greg Bedard works very hard. He and I compete together. Mike Reese is one of my best friends. Phil Perry, who I work with daily. he and I have become, great friends. John Tomasi, and I know that Patriots fans might recoil at his name, but he's one of my best friends. Funny person, incredibly good writer. John Tomasi, Mike Reese, and I were all at the Metro West Daily News way back. And Albert Breer actually was an intern there. So we had a lot of guys. But one thing for folks to bear in mind is we do understand how lucky we are to cover these teams in this period of time, because we could have been in Cleveland or Arizona and not covering our hometown teams. And, would you guys be doing a podcast on a Saturday morning if you were, just imagine. Nobody would care. But here, I can write books, I can do podcasts, I can do TV and profit from it. You can do a passion that you are enjoying. So all that.
All right, we're winding down our time. Chris, any final thoughts?
No, I appreciate it, Tom, for coming on today. I know you're busy more than anybody out here in New England. Hopefully that the Patriots right the ship here and get it back to where they want to be. I know it's going to be difficult. Bill's been known to do that first round. Hey, I'll trade back in the draft and get more picks later on. But they need a lot. So that might be something to look forward to. So Patriot fans, don't get your hopes on maybe that first round big guy, because Bill's been known. Trade that pick, get value later on, and then get a host of players, O-line, wide receiver, and maybe some cornerbacks. So we appreciate you coming on, Tom, and good luck this year with the New England Patriots.
All right. Well, thanks for stopping me and saying hi. And Paul, pleasure to meet you, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
You too. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
All right, Tom E. Curran, sensational guest here on Santos on Sports this morning from NBC Sports Boston. And we are taking your calls this morning. We had Tom for a limited amount of time.
Yes.
We had a commitment right after this, so we wanted to kind of give him the floor. But if you want to pick up on anything that he said and put your opinion in there,
Sure.
Now is the time to do it at 774-301-9432. We're getting a call right now. You want to jump right in there, Chris?
Yeah, let's do that. Sure. Let's take the caller.
Good morning. You're on Santos on Sports.
Good morning, gentlemen.
How are you?
What a great first half of the show.
Thanks very much.
I got to tell you, you hit exactly what I was looking for when you talked to Tom Curran about relationships with some of the folks that he deals with and the sources, and he answered it. Of course, that's his bread and butter, but he answered it at best I've heard, as far as his approach of, he basically deals in facts as opposed to opinions, and I listen to sports radio every morning, and I end up shutting it off all mad because the disdain for Bill Belichick, it's just amazing to me how these sports folks and these talk show hosts, the guy has done nothing but bring championships and winning to this area, and the disdain and the hate and they pick on him. I don't think he cares. I personally, I think I probably care more. But he just answered. Tom did a good job answering it. He basically said, that's what sells. It's a tough business. That's all. I thought it was a great first half. I thought the information was fantastic.
Yeah, thanks a lot. He was a lot of fun. I like to get down to specifically not just about him, but what he thinks of New England coming up. And I thought his expertise on that was excellent. What he thinks is going to happen in the play calling, number one, on the offense. Number two, where he thinks the Patriots should go, maybe in free agency, still left, and obviously the draft coming up. And that's what New England fans really want to know, because it's been a quiet offseason for New England, and I thought he addressed it very well.
Yeah, I just, I like the way he said, I don't, that's not the way that I operate,
Mm-hmm.
But he understands why other folks operate that way.
Sure.
If you can read between the lines there a little bit, I thought it was, very informative for people who maybe even thinking about getting into business or in school right now, and thinking about doing that for a living. You're gonna have to make your own way and have your own technique. And but I thought it was good. I thought professional. I thought when he talked about he had a better relationship with Bill Belichick until such time that he questioned this and that. I thought that was interesting as well. If you push back, you're probably going to get the cold shoulder. Hey, again, I like to put myself in Bill Belichick's shoes and stick up for him a little bit. But can you imagine that, all these guys we talk about, including ourselves, have never played the game, never mind coached the game, and we're criticizing moves that Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots make?
Yeah, well, he did touch upon that a little bit, and I agree with you. Like, I enjoy listening to Felger and these guys argue back and forth, but then I do get tired, like you do. I get tired. I'm like, all right, I had enough of that today. I had enough stress in my day. But I also like it when Tommy Curran comes in, get you that background. Greg Bedard comes in and talks about, hey, we're all talking about Tom Brady and Mac Jones. What about the left tackle? What about the right guard? What about it? He's breaking all down the X's and O's of why the team wasn't successful this year. I love all that stuff too, and it's much more in depth. It takes a little bit more work, I guess, on the listener and so forth. But I agree with the point that you're bringing up and the point that Tommy Curran did. That yes, you definitely want to also have, in addition to the arguments kind of sell the radio, you still want to get in depth and get into the background of a lot of the stuff that Tom was talking about this morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think when Bedard and Breer and those guys, they start to push back on Felger. Hey, you asked me a question, I gave you the answer. I enjoy it. It was like finally someone, pushes back a little bit. It just makes for better radio to me, better, discussion, I guess I should say, not radio. But he made a good point. The Patriots aren't paying his salary. It's like selling newspapers. It's a very fine line, but I appreciate those guys that stick more with facts,
right,
as opposed to speculation. And Bill Belichick, he'll make a statement, and those guys will speak for 4 hours on every single syllable of the statement he made. Well, what is this? What is the? And you see with the in the sentence and the comma. I think that meant this. Are you kidding? No wonder he doesn't talk to the media.
Yeah. All right, we appreciate your support of our show and the kind comments this morning, and we look forward to speaking to you again.
All right, gentlemen, keep it up.
Thank you very much. All right, any thoughts on what the caller had to say?
Yeah, when Tom spoke about, how Bill might treat certain interviews with the media and how he treats his own media, I thought that was pretty impressive what Tom had to say, how he might go and question what Tom is thinking compared to what some of the national people are thinking. And that's nice in a way too. And again, he's right in the organization, doesn't really pay him. And so it's a fine line. And some guys are right on it and some guys are not. And Bill knows who he can speak with and who he can't speak with and what he wants to say to certain people and what he doesn't. So it's a trust thing, Paul. And I thought that was very interesting.
Shout out to Christopher Sylvia this morning, who I believe is watching from Seattle. So we'll have to see what happens with the Seahawks out there. A lot of things happening across the league. So thank you for watching this morning. 774-301-9432 if you want to jump in on what we're talking about this morning. I really enjoyed his comments about the sources and all that. I mean, we got his opinions, of course, but imagine developing the sources to the point where like a Patriot player feels comfortable saying, hey, this is what's happening over here. And Tommy Curran's going to take that and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Yeah. And that Patriot player feels totally comfortable that it's not going to leak out that it was that person. Now, of course, it's in the reporter's interest not to mess that up because then that would hurt their career. But, to build that kind of trust, I find that fascinating because his information, there was a time where people thought that Brady was building a house in Connecticut and he was going to go to the New York Giants or something like that. And Tom Curran shot that down and he was pushing back against a lot of other credible people that were saying that was going on. And Tom's like, nope, I double-checked, I triple-checked. He didn't buy a house in Connecticut. He didn't build a house in Connecticut. And he was right.
Yeah, he was. And that comes both ways, because now the professional athlete has to instill the trust, of this person. And can they work together and make this cohesiveness where it does come out the way they both want it to come out, and it doesn't hurt one and it doesn't hurt the other. And that's difficult to do. And you got to find a way to do it, inside the system, in the organization, and what can be said and what cannot be. And it's a big trust factor. So Tom has done it right. He's been there since 1997. He has seen the ins and outs, from the bad, from all them great years of winning. So congratulations to him and the organization of really having a good trust factor with the two of them.
You guys are doing absolutely fantastic, man.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, kind of what I wanted to talk about. I don't know if you briefly touched on this, but with Curran, I was a little bit late on the interview. But
Okay.
my goodness, the AFC West is absolutely stacked with all the moves that they've been making as of late. And it does seem that because of the way a division like that is going, the Patriots are kind of just falling. I think a tick would be generous, like a bit behind.
No, I agree with you there. And it's a matter of now, can Bill build up that defense to stop great quarterbacks like Mahomes, Hebert, Russell Wilson, and of course now Derek Carr with some more weapons. So that's going to be interesting in the rest of this free agency, and of course the draft, where he wants to build up and how to, because that defense was a little suspect last year. Can they slow down them big offenses? And the AFC West has really stepped up their game over this free agency. No doubt about it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I got to say, I'm very happy for Josh McDaniels over in Vegas. He's going to have a ton of fun now calling plays for, Derek Carr, now with his former Fresno State teammate, and in my opinion, the best receiver in football, Devontae Adams, to go with Hunter Renfrow, who's a fantastic slot receiver, arguably the best receiving tight end in the league with Darren Waller. It's going to be interesting. If they can get that offensive line shored up, they could be dangerous. I really think so.
Except that he's got the toughest division in football, though.
Oh, exactly, yeah. But if all four teams in the division could make the playoffs, I think it would be them.
Right.
Well, the one thing I want to see out of Josh McDaniels is, remember, this is his second stint now as an NFL coach. I'd like to see him improve, and hopefully he's learned from what he did over in Denver, now coming in his second stint, to really say, hey, I got the reins, I know what I'm doing, and I can lead a team to the playoffs and possibly to a Super Bowl. So I think it's a lot on his shoulders after being always behind the shadow of Bill Belichick, and what now he can do on his own in his second stint.
Yeah, and I remember watching a few interviews that he had with, be it the Vegas local media and national media. Like say, I was actually watching his interview with what's his name, Chris Sims last night, and that was those were automatically some of the questions that people asked him. It was like, what did you learn from your first stint in Denver, where you kind of struggled when you came back to work with Belichick some more, and now what are you going to take there? And one of the things he addressed immediately was like, one of my failures in Denver was that, I didn't really create those relationships with people around the building. So I think if he can, improve on that, and obviously improve on some other things, they could be something. I love what him and Ziegler are doing thus far.
Yep. All right, and let's go back to the Patriots just for a second before we let you go, right? And I'd asked Tom this, right? Patriots are just kind of sitting there not doing anything. And then my thought was, well, if everybody that they have from last year got better, everybody, even if each one of them got 20% better, Mac Jones a little better, Bourne, Smith, Aguilar, Henry, White is coming back from an injury. Barmore, Judon, Millis, everybody a little bit better, familiar with the system. Second year, a little bit better, right? Now you throw in a good draft. Maybe they still have a chance to grab a free agent. Could they still somehow be a playoff team?
I think it's still going to be tough just because just the way that the AFC is loaded up a little bit. And I will say, Jonnu Smith had better get better because of that huge contract that we gave him before, and hopefully Aguilar will too. Even though I had seen that, I guess they wanted to move on and maybe get Robbie Anderson. But if those guys get better, sure, maybe we can improve a tick. But I don't know if that puts us over the top against like Buffalo for the division or whatever. I certainly hope everyone does get better, but I'm not sure what that's going to do in the long run just because of the landscape that is the AFC right now.
Yeah, and let's remember also the Patriots' schedule this year, I believe, includes the AFC West. So they got to play the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Chiefs, and the Broncos. So that's 4 games right there that puts them under the pressure right from the beginning.
Hey, Ryan, we really appreciate the call this morning. Thank you so much for your support, and we look forward to speaking to you again.
No problem. Great talking to you guys.
Hey, thanks
you
a
very
lot.
much.
Appreciate it.
All right. Yes, it was Missy Rocha Farias that was saying, oh, my goodness, you guys got Curran. That is phenomenal. And we have to thank Chris Santos right over there for interacting with Tom up there in the great town of Lakeville, Massachusetts. So
Yeah, that's
that was
correct.
the connection there. Bobby O'Brien is saying the Patriots are operating as if Mac Jones can make up for all their personnel deficiencies the way Brady used to. I've heard that from other fans as well.
Yeah, and you heard Tom talk about it, Paul, how Brady regressed a little bit. Second and third year, did some mistakes. Same thing he thinks maybe with Mac. So got to be a little patient, Patriot fans, and say, hey, this is still our guy. This is what we're going with. So be careful. Don't expect, Super Bowl bound right away. And as Paul said, we're relying on these second-year guys to really make a difference, whether it's 20%, 50%, whatever they can do. Hopefully, with a new offensive coordinator, they get together and they can right the ship.
You know, when Tommy Curran was on the screen, Bobby O'Brien said 3 brilliant New England football minds right there on the screen. Well, he also said no grab ass. well, that's what Felger said. We'll take a little bit.
Says.
Yeah, we'll take just a little.
Yeah,
but thank you very much for your support, Bobby. You're always,
appreciate it, Bobby.
You're always enjoyable. And Julie Laravia Clark, who's a friend of mine, says, "Hey, Tom." So she may know Tom from, his interactions here in the area. And as we mentioned before, Jay Mello watching this morning. Boy, I want to see the Patriots do well. I want to see him fight for a playoff spot. Now we got Deshaun Watson, in the AFC,
Yep.
Russell Wilson. I'm happy that, Rodgers went back to the NFC, but and Josh Hebert's team is piling up. Buffalo just added a big piece. If you're a Patriots fan, I can sort of look at it and say, all right, maybe all these guys will be a little bit better. I don't know. I feel like I'm grasping at straws. It does feel like if the Patriots were like the 7th best team in the league or something like that, it feels like they're 11th or 12th now. I mean, there is some frustration. Even if they had just gone out and got Robinson, just that one guy, just something, or one edge guy and one wide receiver. That's it. Everything else stand pat. At least that would be something. It feels like they've done next to nothing.
Well, let's think about, Paul, in last year and maybe a couple of years before. Everybody talked about the great teams of the NFL coming out of the NFC, not the AFC. How quickly this may change, where now the top teams are in the AFC and maybe not the NFC. So start to think about how that has transpired just this year alone. That's going to be quite interesting to see, where there's a little bit more parity between the AFC and the NFC. So I'm looking forward to that when it gets to playoff time down the stretch, which teams are making it, which quarterbacks are in there, and who's not going to be in there. So it's going to be a fun year with the addition of the players who have gone to certain teams, like a Khalil Mack now playing with the Chargers, a great pickup by them, and some other teams that made some moves. Miami's made some small moves, picked up some running backs. They got some things going on down there too. Maybe they got a new coach. They can right the ship on that end. So I'm curious to see how the AFC now performs, because it used to be all NFC. So let's see what happens now.
While you were saying that, I was looking at the comments section, and Mr. Guarantee typed in, Miami has even made some improvements. Yeah, I forgot about it. It's not like
Yeah.
the Patriots lost to Miami twice last year, right?
Yep.
So now you're going to play Buffalo twice. You're going to play Miami twice, and then you alluded to some of the other teams on their schedule.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you could be anywhere from a 10-win team, trying to sneak into the playoffs, to a 5 or 6-win team if you start losing some of these games. I mean, you could lose all of those games by a field goal, and it's still in the loss column. So I'm not optimistic right now. I'm not. I'm very afraid at what this season might bring us.
Well, I think Curran was trying to be very nice and just sitting back. He talked about the release of them offensive line players. He probably could have been a little bit more firmer and said, hey, the Patriots, geez, what are they doing? And giving up this, and that. And he knows that, hey, they got to rebuild. They got to find some people to protect Mac. They got to get some people after the other quarterbacks from the other teams who are now in the AFC. And so a lot is going on with the Patriots this year. Let's see how they improve at the end of this free agency and how they make out in the draft to say, all right, we got some guys and some pieces in the puzzle that we need to make sure we protect that quarterback, and we get him some receivers, and we get some defensive guys that can help us, stop some other offenses in the AFC.
Mark Sylvia just put a list together of the teams that he says are now better than the Patriots.
Yeah, okay.
This is going to take a few seconds for me to read this off. Chargers, Chiefs, Raiders, Broncos, Colts, Bills, Titans, Bengals, Ravens, even the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, I don't know. It's giving me a queasy feeling this year. I'm looking at these, the Bournes and the Smiths and the Aguilars, and Hunter Henry had a pretty good year, and James White's coming back. But still, I don't know. I just hope that they're competitive and that they give us a good product this year. That's all.
Yeah, and if those guys can pick up their game and improve along with what they do coming up, hopefully that will keep them in the hunt. And obviously, when you play those big teams, find a way to be in that ball game and hopefully pull something out. And, it's going to rely a lot on Mac in year 2. But as Tom said, that arm strength needs to improve. Make some passes when you're not stepping into the throws, Paul. That was a very key point right there. When you're not stepping into the throws. And when you don't have offensive linemen, how are you not going to step into the throws? So be careful. Watch out what you wish for. Hopefully he gets that, and that will be a second-year transition to hook up with whoever's the offensive line, first of all, to protect him, and then number 2, the offensive coordinator to come out. And it was interesting in the name that he put for an offensive coordinator, not Joe Judge and not Matt Patricia.
Right, exactly, right. So we got some good information this morning here from Tom E. Curran.
Sure
you mentioned the offensive line, that's right, because even if Mac Jones has better arm strength, even if all those lists of players are 20% better in year 2, what good is it if your second-year quarterback is running for his life?
That's correct. And right now he talked about guard depth. So there's a big position right there that they need to fill. Never mind maybe a little bit on the tackles as well. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think Bill trades down and finds a way to get more guys, get more depth, get more offensive line, find some big guys to protect, and then see how it goes. If he sneaks out a guy in the agency at the end, we'll see. Maybe that will help him too. But you got to start there to help out Mac, open holes for your running backs and the guys that you have, and Stevenson and Harris. And now you got White back. So I think it's got to be the O-line, build from there.
And sometimes you can spend money on free agents like you did last year. They hit on some, but some didn't work. And sometimes that happens. You can get a talented guy and open up the bank, and then for some reason he doesn't work. So maybe that's what Bill is thinking. We did that last year. We got to do it a little bit different this year is maybe the thought process. Okay, let's devote the last 15 minutes to the Celtics and the Bruins. Let's start with the Celtics because, hey, those late night games, I start them and then I'm off into dreamland over there. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the Celtics have gone something like 19-3, something ridiculous like that. And I'm like, oh my God, right? The light bulb has gone off. They're passing the ball around. Tatum and Brown, the dynamic duo, they've come together. Marcus Smart knows his role. White's fitting right in there. Even Pritchard off the bench and these different guys. Wow, can this last right into the playoffs and through the playoffs? They seem like they're really dangerous right now.
The parity between the team and the scoring is something that I look forward to and see every night in the box score. So if I'm getting 32 from Tatum, 30 from Brown, I love that. I have a tough time watching one guy score 40 and 50, but the rest of the team is not doing much. And we've seen that from LeBron and the Lakers lately, and they haven't been winning that much. So if I would rather see what the Celtics are doing now and get that for the rest of the season, great. Tough loss against Dallas. Doncic beats them down the stretch, unfortunately. Like to see when they play teams like that, be on top. They'll be the ones who make it down the stretch. So that will be something I'll be looking for in the last 15, 20 games or so to see against better teams, pull those games out. But I like the way they're going, Paul. How can you not? I mean, people wanted to blow this team up. And now they're, in that stretch where they're 5th, 4th, and 3rd in the standings, trying to make that last push, see how high they can get, and then let it roll into the playoffs and see what happens. But, Doka's got to be happy with his lineup, his system, 6th man, 7th man, his rotation. Got to be happy with what I'm seeing, and hopefully they can do something down the stretch and then into the playoffs.
We want to thank our viewers that are watching today on New Bedford Guide, Fall River Reporter, New Bedford Live, Santos on Sports, and Paul Santos Live. We got a few minutes to jump in if you'd like to. It's 774-301-9432. And big thanks, of course, to Tommy Curran for being with us at the beginning of the show. Just a terrific guest. So much knowledge, so enjoyable talking to him this morning. Absolutely. Okay,
he has his own podcast, and he's got his weekly shows. And, I mean, it's tough on a Saturday morning to help out two guys, but I'm so happy that he came on. It was a pleasure to have him, even for 20 minutes. It's a great time. The guy's very knowledgeable of what's going on in the NFL.
And, of course, we got our black and gold team, the Boston Bruins.
Yep.
Both them and the Celtics are out west, so they're all playing these late-night games. But a couple of things, people seem to think that we need a couple of things. We need another forward, perhaps a center or good two-way forward, or even somebody that can put the puck in the net. Well, that's always good. Claude Giroux doesn't want to come for whatever reason. But anyway, they also need another defenseman. So let's say they get that. They get the defenseman, they get the forward. Well, Bergeron's out right now. Now Pasternak, he pulled something yesterday. So I got to tell you, it seems to me they need a number of things. They need the defenseman added at the trade deadline. They need another forward added at the trade deadline. But they also need Swayman to stand on his head in the playoffs. And they also need nobody to get injured. And so that's a lot that has to happen. Obviously, they can beat anybody, I think. They can also be beat by anybody.
Yeah, and this weekend, Paul, is the weekend for the trade deadline. It's on Monday, 4 o'clock. So if you're the Bruins fan, hopefully something happens in these next 2 days. A lot of guys have been taken out of lineups, like Giordano from Seattle Kraken, a couple other guys from Anaheim, a couple of guys from Winnipeg, now not in the lineup, which means something's in the works. Is it the Bruins? Is it not the Bruins? This is the weekend to find out, to see if the Bruins get the defenseman they want or a forward in the depth. Hopefully Bergeron gets right back in and Pasta's injury is not too severe, and then finish down the stretch and get themselves ready for the playoffs.
Butch Ferreira just made a comment. I still think DeBrusque will be traded only because he wants out. Too risky to keep him if he just does not want to play for the Bruins. I agree with that up to a point, but I got to tell you, he made another really nice play yesterday, and even if he's not putting the puck in the net, if he can just get in there, he's a great forechecker, he has great speed, and he goes in there and he generates opportunities for Marchand and Bergeron. I don't know, I'm starting to rethink that maybe you just leave him there. What do you think, Chris?
Well, it's a two-way street. Does some other team want him? It's not just the Bruins getting rid of him. It's that some other team's going to want him, pay his contract, find a spot for him in their lineup, whether they agree that he is the player that they want him to be, or the Bruins sit back and say, hey, we've given him a shot. He stepped up enough to give what we want from him, and then they keep him. So it's going to be interesting if another team says, yeah, DeBrusque is a guy that we want, and let's go get him.
I don't know if it's a fluke that he's working there with Marchand and Bergeron, and some people say, well, a lot of players would work with the talent that you have there. But sometimes you put somebody there, and for whatever reason, it doesn't click. Now, if the Bruins trade DeBrusque, now you got to figure out who's going to be there. You're going to put somebody there, and you've only got from now to the beginning of the playoffs to see if they click. Whereas at least right now, this is clicking. At least it's clicking for right now, and it could click in the future. So I concern myself with, if you do get rid of DeBrusque, who goes there? And you don't have that much time to figure it out between now and the playoffs.
Well, that's true. So you need an established forward who's got some experience, maybe to get in there, work up with two tremendous players in Bergeron and Marchand, as long as they're healthy, and fit right in. And again, right away, because there's only same thing, 15, 20 games left, and then it's on to the playoffs. So it's got to be pretty quick. I like the way at least Cassidy didn't sit back on his heels. He made moves inside the organization, took chances, put Swayman in, says he's my guy, changed the Brusque, put Pasta to the second line, made some moves in-house, and then said, okay, what can we do now to further help our team? Hopefully that's this weekend. Add a couple of pieces to the puzzle, and then to make the move down the stretch.
All right, let's see. We have about 10 minutes left, so 774-301-9432 if you'd like to jump into the conversation with myself and Chris Santos of Santos on Sports. I don't want to talk about baseball too long because we have all summer to do that, but flipped on the TV the other day, and there they were, your Boston Red Sox on the screen playing at JetBlue Park. And I was at JetBlue Park, but there were no games going on, so I took the tour, and then as soon as I left, they started playing baseball again. But it was kind of nice. I'm a little frustrated with that whole thing, but it was kind of nice to see the Red Sox back on the screen of my television.
Yeah, it was. And at the same time, now it's New England fans saying, what are the Red Sox doing? Are we just going to stand there, twiddle our thumbs, and watch great players go by, like Freddie Freeman, a couple other players signed already? I heard Carlos Correa got signed this morning from Houston. The Minnesota Twins landed him. The only thing I've heard, it's not official. Supposedly Trevor Story, shortstop from Colorado, supposed to be coming to Boston. It's a matter if he wants to play second base for the Red Sox because they got, obviously, Xander Bogaerts, who's their normal shortstop, and I don't see Trevor taking his spot. So will Trevor say, yeah, I'll go there and have an opportunity to play second base? But it's a great bat in that lineup. Bogaerts and Devers said, yeah, we'd love to have him with what he can do. So his contract is a big one. The Red Sox are making a big push for him. Supposedly it's a done deal. It's just a matter of, that fine line. Let's see if it goes through. And that'd be a big pickup for the Boston Red Sox.
It's only one game, but Bobby Dahlbeck had a great game the other day. And so there may be a line of thinking there too, that, hey, some of these guys that we have, these younger guys, they're expecting them to step it up this year. And so if Bobby Dahlbeck kind of blossoms into what they think he's going to be, that would really help the team.
It sure would. And Dahlbeck's been there now for a couple of years. He needs to take it to the next level. It can't be a 220 hitter. I'd like to see at least 260 into that double-digit home runs, a lot on the RBIs, expecting a lot out of him in that mid to lower part of the lineup, whether it's 6, 7, or 8. Help out at first base, obviously. That would be a big piece of the puzzle to really help out. Let's see if he's developed for another year. Young kid, strong kid. Hopefully he's, grooming up to be a solid first baseman, not just defensively, but offensively with that bat.
All right, we started with the Patriots. Maybe we'll circle back to the last few moments. I was wondering if you thought, and again, this is all speculation. We don't have the sources that Tom E. Curran has, but I have to wonder, from Bob Kraft's point of view, I think he was probably embarrassed that, he let Brady go and he went and won a Super Bowl. So then he opens up the wallet, spends whatever it was, the $200+ million and so forth, the guaranteed money, $250,000 in guaranteed money. And all it got them was 3 more wins than the year before, 7 wins the year before to 10 wins with Cam Newton, who was arguably just really struggling at quarterback. And now, of course, you got the rookie quarterback. But, maybe a lot of it's coming from Kraft. Hey, I'm not going to, blow up the bank again. to get some of these guys that you're telling me is going to put us back in, Super Bowl contention. We can't be doing this every year, not because he couldn't do it. He doesn't want to do it. It costs them money. It costs the Kraft family, the ownership group money. So maybe there's some pushback from Kraft saying, hey, we did that last year and that only got us a few wins. So you're the greatest coach of all time. Coach these guys up.
Yeah, I don't think it's that way, Paul. I think it's, communication between the two of them and say, hey, if we go get this guy, this is really going to help our team. Or we can't get this guy. He costs too much. We don't have all the ins and outs. As you heard Tom Curran speak about everybody, he talked about contracts. He knew exactly what everybody was making and what they can and cannot do. We don't know that specifically. We really have to research it out and talk about it. But I don't see Kraft doing that and say, hey, Bill, I gave you your guys. Now you coach and you go do it. I think it's a together street. They want to work the best that they can to represent New England, get them back to where they like to be, which is on top in the AFC East, and then obviously on top in the playoffs, and hopefully back to a Super Bowl. So I think it's just a matter of putting it together with Bill and Bob at the same time.
I asked Ryan whether he thought the Patriots could possibly be contending for a playoff spot. It looks like a tough road, but what do you think? Do you think that the Patriots have a good shot to make the playoffs, or do you think that it's more likely that they're going to miss this year?
Well, what's been going on and the schedule that they have this year, I think it's going to be tough for the Patriots to make the playoffs. And if they do, I think, like last year, they may just get there. A lot's happening in the AFC. Maybe some late pieces of the puzzle that can pick up in free agency. If not, they're going to have an outstanding draft. And these guys are going to have to come right from college, right into the starting lineup, unless they got depth and guys, in the reserves that are going to take the place and still do the job. I don't see it. So it's going to be an interesting draft for the New England Patriots.
Of course, a lot can go wrong. You see the Cleveland Browns, they're putting Watson in there. How does it work? Is he as good as they say? They emptied the bank for him, gave him just about, I think it was the biggest contract in NFL history. So you have that. You have a lot of quarterbacks moving around. You might look at someone and say, oh, yeah, we get this quarterback. Now that means we're going to go to the playoffs. Well, some of these other teams could have problems. There's injuries. Maybe the quarterback doesn't blend in. Look what happened with Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. They thought he was going to be something. He turned out not to be the something that they thought he was, and now he's going somewhere else. So sometimes these big, high-priced players can go places and become busts.
Yeah, they can. And how about interviewing there, saying you don't want to go there? Then it's like these two teams are now the teams that I'm going to get. Oh, no, wait a minute. I'm going to go back there, and yeah, I'm going to sign with you. So it was Deshaun was not going to go to Cleveland. I'm going to stay with Carolina or New Orleans. Those are my two teams. Oh, wait a minute. Baker now wants out. Okay, well, now he's going to go. He doesn't like it there. So he tweets out, I'm done with Cleveland. And Deshaun says, okay, I'm going to take it now. So it's a lot of ins and outs behind the scenes that we don't know about. And then you find out, we had Randy Gregory. We had him signed. He was penciled in. He looked at the contract. He didn't like the language. And he says, bye-bye, Dallas. I'm going to Denver. So the next thing you know, we thought we signed him, and then he left, and now he's with Denver. So a lot of things happen behind the scenes that we don't know about, and it happens to good teams. It happens to bad teams. Some guys excel at it, and some guys can't get out of the cellar. So for Watson and Mayfield, two guys going in different directions, it's a plus for Cleveland and Watson because it's experience. They really like him. Let's see where Mayfield now moves to and what happens to him. But, those things, it just happens that way, Paul. And you know how them superstars are, boy. They like the money and a lot of divas, and it says it's my team and I'm running the show.
We don't make guarantees here, but
No.
you know who's going to make the playoffs next year? The Dallas Cowboys. Or who do they have to beat over? If the Patriots are in the NFC, they'd make the playoffs too.
Yeah,
But that's a discussion for another.
that's another time right now.
I'm just tweaking my partner over here just a little bit. Hey, Chris, that was great getting Tommy Curran.
It was fun.
And credit goes to Chris because Chris knows Tom a little bit. And
Yep.
He was very gracious to come on with us this morning. And I thought he was an excellent person to interview because we'd give him the question. He'd hit it out of the park. We'd get his insight. and it was really enjoyable. So again,
Yeah, I'd
thanks
like
to
to
Tommy
reach out
Curran.
to him again. Maybe we can have him, Paul, as the season's going to begin almost before week 1. By then, the draft will know exactly the starting lineups, and we'll have in there, and we'll see what Tom thinks moving forward for New England and how far they can go.
All right. So thanks to our viewers and our callers this morning, and once again to Tom E. Curran from NBC Sports Boston for being our special guest, talking about the Patriots, and more of the Patriots.
Yeah.
For my partner, Mr. Chris Santos, I'm Paul Santos for Santos on Sports. We'll see you next week right here. Have a great weekend.